doesn't work for some reason with Discord, but cool. How it's working. Doing it on my
Cool.
phone.
Yeah, how you been, man?
Pretty good, man. I've been today I was just watching like I'm going into like Andrew Sullivan, like the guy who's like the National Security Council chief right now. I was watching his shit with on the Aspen Institute. It's pretty spooky stuff.
Oh yeah, what's going on?
Do you know what the Aspen Institute is?
No idea.
It's like this old like eugenics thing created in like the like 1940s. Like it was created by like the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, these sorts of people, Gates, Lumina, Ford Foundation, etc. But this is like they have like their own YouTube channel and they have like talks with people, and it's like no one ever watches them, but like this has 1,000 views on it, but it's like the national security advisor just like laying out what the Biden foreign policy is going to be.
What's I think it's like mysterious. So what's actually going on that front?
It's really not that mysterious, right? They're just saying like he's just saying like we have to like defend Taiwan against China, and that's our foreign policy basically. Like there's a lot he uses a lot of euphemisms and he doesn't go that deep into specifics, but that's the gist of it.
Damn.
One thing that's kind of spooky is that he specifically says that Taiwan's approach to fighting disinformation is something that we should use here.
What is Taiwan's approach?
That's what I've been looking into, like right now. I'm trying to look into that. I feel like that would be spooky, though. Whatever it is. How are you doing, man?
Um, I'm debating that guy again tomorrow, the Hegelian, fake Hegelian
The
guy.
fake alien, yeah, that guy's a fucking poser, man. He like it's just really funny. Like he was like he doesn't even know what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah,
It's
it's just fucking exhausting, it's just tiring. But I was meaning to ask you, or no, I didn't mean to ask you. Someone in chat wants to know, what do you think about the U.S. leaving Afghanistan to like give China problems?
I don't
Like,
think that's true. I don't think that's happening because actually, like I saw that, but actually, like Biden was just saying that they're sending more troops to Afghanistan now to defend
really?
the Afghan government force. Yeah, I could go. There was an NPR article
Oh,
on
to
it this morning.
Kabul,
Actually,
right? To evacuate the embassy.
let me just read it. I have it up. I like tweet. Okay, Biden deploys more troops following Taliban advances Afghanistan. That was 5 a.m. this morning.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
Damn.
people were saying that as kind of a cope, like this idea that like that's actually kind of almost putting too much of the competence into the hands of these people when like they're actually just like they're like LARPing as if they're as like capable to do what we did in like the earlier part of the 20th century, but like they are also like a moribund institution themselves. They don't really you know what I mean? Like they don't have they're not like we're not dealing with like fucking like Alan Dulles here. Like these people are they're stupider and they're worse at
Let
it.
me let me tell you something. I was debating someone, yeah, and I want to debate them again. And they told me that according to this survey, which is 100% reliable, called the Survey of the Afghan People and like a bunch of others, actually the Taliban are extremely unpopular in Afghanistan, and that the majority of Afghan people want the US to stay. And that
According to the people that polled, right? Like the
yeah.
like so yeah,
So
that
my
makes sense,
question
right?
is that if that's true, and that like the asking the US and NATO to stay is the expression of like national self-determination, then how come the minute the US like pulls out, the Taliban fucking rapidly takes everything over? Like, how does that work?
Oh, well, we all know that legit. Well, this is one of the things I was pressing Amy on in the debate, right? Where I was talking about like legitimacy, like what legitimacy means, like what a government, you know what I mean? Like if a government has or does not have legitimacy. So it's like the reason why the Taliban's able to do that is because they have legitimacy. You know what I mean? It's like because people will like that's what affords it. It is like an actual like fact, like it's a possibility space, or however you would want to put it, in a political action. And that's why, I mean, obviously, like the Taliban was never like unpopular or something. It's like they were just against our interests.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Amy is like, I don't know. I do have criticisms of her, but like, I just don't want her to take it personally, you know? Like, I'm not like a hater, you know? But
See, I'm not like a hater, but I'm more of like, like if you're hammering on the same thing for like over a year and there's like been no growth in like your
so
development,
yeah.
like I'm trying to like be like, if you're not gonna like grow and you're not gonna like progress and you're not gonna like produce new insights, then then you're just taking up space.
Well,
Like you're
it's
just
not
saying the
just that.
same
It's
shit
that
over
when
and
you
over.
so this is something that's really important to learn from dialectics, right? When you get into a one-sided position, you end up basically assuming the thing you're attempting to contrast yourself from, but in another way. Like, I'll give you an example of this. This is like the best example I can think of. So, I remember a lot of those leftists who were like super against wokeness, right? And
Yeah.
liberals, woke liberals and SJWs, whatever, which is great, right? But then,
Maybe. Yeah, sometimes.
yeah, but then something strange started to happen, right? They went beyond the mere opposition to the like phenomena of woke people and started to kind of like attack the material source. And what I mean by that is it's like then they started to go so far as to say that all nationalism is to be opposed as like a result of liberal wokeness, like as if Malcolm X was secretly like a fucking, secretly he was like this like they made it seem like they didn't understand the difference between people who were being opportunistic with something real and the real thing itself. Is that if that makes sense? So
Yeah.
in actual fact, what they ended up doing was assuming the very position of the professional liberal managerials in their kind of universalistic condemnation of like black separatism or nationalism and anti-colonial. And it's like I get it. I get how woke people use those as a kind of whatever slave morality or whatever they want to say, and they use those as a kind of extension of wokeness, treating it like national self-determination movements around the world as some kind of marginal groups resisting oppression. I get that, but they're it's like they're confusing that with the thing itself, like the thing in itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's like because they're right to note that a lot, like when if like Joe Biden starts talking about Malcolm X or
Yeah.
something like that, like that's not like the cynical deployment of these things, like severed from their historical meaning, and it just like presented in that sort of idolatrous fashion is always like a
Well,
bad thing.
it's why the Hegelian idea of negation is so important, because the whole point of it is basically like when the negation itself must be negated. Like what I mean by that is that you have to arrive at like a deeper sense of positive being. And I'll give you a concrete example. Like for example, like in revolutions, right? So usually in a revolution, what happens is that the revolutionaries who are urban, right, primarily urban, they go about attacking the old order within the urban confines, and they go crazy. And then something strange happens. The countryside rises up, seizing the moment and basically affirming the real positive being of the revolution. And just because they don't do it on the terms of this urban people, the revolutionaries become the counter revolutionaries, right? That's the oldest story in the book. The revolution happens, then the countryside wakes up, and the revolutionaries become the counter revolutionaries because
Yeah.
the cities become in the crosshairs. It becomes like it's almost like a fucking comedy, like a tragedy, right?
Well, yeah,
So
I'm gonna tie this to like the Bible in a way where you could even see like like Moses is like leading people towards the promised land, but he like doesn't get to go into it. So like that's also happens with like revolutionary movements where it's like because the countryside is like ultimately what has to like everyone has to like take it in. You know, the ruling class of the revolution or whatever is they kind of have to abolish themselves also. That yeah, it is like very Hegelian, but I
Yeah,
get all my dialectics from like just what I would call like divine ironies or something, or like contrapasso,
yeah, it's
as
the same.
Dante
It's
would put
it's
it.
exactly the same thing, and so I don't know. I mean, I think in the case of Amy, I just think she kind of dwells in this like
So
unhappy
the
con.
unhappy consciousness,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, where it's like it's this permanent negation, and it's you're coming full circle, and kind of arriving at a position that epitomizes the very thing you strove to contrast yourself with in regards to. So, for example, like I agree with a lot of the stuff Amy says. She talks about how like the way in which capitalism devours the traditional. You know what? There was an argument Amy kind of had with you that I kind of was a little bit sympathetic to Amy with, and it was the thing about feudalism. So I agree with you in the sense that feudalism, I mean, feudalism was an entirely corrupt thing, right? Especially toward the later stages.
Yeah.
It was pretty much the modern capitalism, but disguising itself in the old feudal forms, right? That's pretty much kind of what happened. Um, but there is this kind of truth in the idea that feudalism did represent this kind of substantive like life, like tradition and culture and substantive social bonds and a sense of coherent meaning in life and things like that. And just this kind of consistency, I guess, if that makes sense. Um, and not necessarily just feudalism, but traditional life in general, before modern capitalism. And capitalism pretty much overturns all of that, so that, and this is a really traumatic thing. Like this is like the pauperization is what it's called, and landlessness and all that, following the enclosures and shit. And although necessary, it's like not necessarily something to be celebrated, right? But
I don't
but
know.
I
I kind of disagree on that point
oh really? Yeah, go ahead. I'm not like too
because like,
educated about history, so you're
well, it's
probably
just
right. Yeah.
well, feudal, like, you know, feudalism is like it has like its own development, and like be like, you know, you can't like equating where it's like there's this notion where we had this sort of timeless like enclosed space of like harmony that was the medieval world. Like it was always rife with its own dialectics, and like it was a time of like a lot of warfare. They were like on smaller scale than what is possible under capitalism and things like that. Like certainly like technology and like the progression in all of these other ways affords more evil just as it affords more good. But I don't think like there's so much we take for granted like on the smallest level that like mass literacy, for instance,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I
Like
agree with
mass
you.
literacy is like I think like really the that's like the foundation, right? Like what we don't even know what it's like to be a serf, like, and not be able to like like you literally like you can't imagine or like put yourself in that consciousness precisely
No,
because
no,
it's totally alien.
no, I completely agree. It's kind of like dialogue, like the kind of the the image of the kind of like meaningful, wholesome past is something created by
Yeah, it's like, or actually this
it's
notion of
very lost. Yeah, I
this
completely
notion is
agree.
actually is a production of capitalism
No,
because
no,
like
yeah,
people
yeah.
weren't yeah, like
But I
because
still
that's like
think
a huge
I
thing
still would
is
insist though that despite all the things you talked about, there is still a way that pre-modern and traditional life made life somehow bearable, and like there wasn't an existential crisis every generation is what I'm trying to say. Like people somehow just survived, and they had traditions that they passed on, and there was wars and there was a lot of turmoil and chaos, but it,
yeah, but anytime like let's say like, you know, then they start going like, oh, like we're gonna start reading books, and then like they start reading books and they're like, hey, like we have our own ideas, and then it's like, oh, like now I'm being put to death.
no,
So
yeah,
there
yeah, I
is
mean, but
like, you know,
that's
like
usually something that happened like in cities, right? Like with the guilds and medieval city. I mean, I'm not just talking about the medieval Europe. I'm also talking about like also Asian traditional Asian societies as well, and the Islamic world and so on and so on.
yeah.
It's
No,
like
I don't think that those things should be erased or like disappeared, but I think that those things, like the spirit of those things, can be preserved, and like that's part of what I think the 21st century is probably going to be a lot of with like
Yeah,
China,
yeah.
especially,
I
is
am
like,
not trying to
yeah,
like I'm not one of those like return to the I'm not one of those people who's
yeah,
trying to like
you're not an
romanticize.
anarcho primitivist or
No,
something.
I'm not romanticizing pre-capitalist life. There's a reason why modernity was necessary, not just from like a not from a utilitarian perspective, but like historical perspective necessary. But I do think that it does kind of follow the Hegelian drama of like original being, the negation, and then the negation of the negation. And to me, capitalist modernity is that kind of negation. You know?
Yeah, so now like that's what I'm saying is like we're at the point of where it's like we're starting to look more at like the pre-capitalist societies and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
for
and
like
not
inspiration.
return to them because
Yeah, but to just like, to bring them back like through
their
this sort of
essence.
yeah, this is
Yeah,
what Marshall McLuhan called this like the retrieval function of like a new media ecology. Like every time there's a new media environment, you actually are also, it like serves as a means of retrieving things that were like lost like from the past.
yeah,
So and like I think that's like a huge thing of like what's happening right now
yeah. But what I
in
see,
general.
the thing I don't get about Amy, or I think I kind of get it, but that's why I disagree with her, is it's like it doesn't seem like she's willing to accept that the subjective truth she has arrived at is reproduced in objective reality independently of like her. And what I mean by that is like I mean, okay, you want to talk about the working class traditionalism or something. It's like look at China. That's what China is. China,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
China is like the very site at which the subjective truth you've arrived at exists objectively, you know? It's precisely where not just China, but it's like that is precisely the site of where people like she talks about the way capitalism breaks down tradition, culture, and the working class. And it's like, but the examples of people who have united populist, working class, authentic working class movements with their culture and tradition and national whatever, like in the socialist countries and in China, it seems like Amy is really dismissive and like not open to
I
accepting.
just don't think that she reads much or is like that interested
It
in
is,
like,
and I'm not saying this to like insult her because I was actually very much in a similar state before too. Like I was in a state like before I learned about China, I was the type of person who was like, "Oh, like I've read so much about Marxism and philosophy, like how could it possibly be that the world is already reconciled in some kind of way? Like China, oh, China's just like a
yeah,
capitalist
any
shithole.
why like
It's just
they're doing something without my sanction,
yeah,
like
yeah,
people,
exactly.
other people
Yeah, like
exist. Yeah,
China's just like Foxconn and the fucking suicide nets, and it's like, but you don't really realize. I think it's an inability to understand like an authentic, objective reality of otherness, like that there
yeah,
is a real otherness out there that's independent of you.
absolutely. And the fact that it's like the East itself, like the like, because what is the East but like China, frankly.
Yeah,
That is a like extremely like sort of like symbolic in my mind. And like the more I've like gotten interested in China and read more about it, like I see more of it in like things, or like how my own intellectual development like led me to this interest or in it. Like I feel like it's like been a very natural progression. Like
same.
people
Yeah,
don't really understand. Like I remember believing like all the bullshit about China, and I just like had never had any reason to look into it more. And then I started taking it like very seriously because I was like, this is like one place that I actually don't know. Like I'm not super well versed in China and like the history of China and all this stuff, and it's like so large. It's like such a huge thing to start to wrestle with or grapple with. But like reading like Ezra Pound and all these other people, like Chinese stuff, and like I've always loved like Lao Tzu and like Chun Tzu, like Chinese philosophy was always important to me, even when I was like a teenager.
but
So
we tend to
it's
have a kind of natural, I don't know natural, but we just have a prejudice that when we arrive at a subjective truth, we are somehow above objective reality and objective being. And the Eastern way of thinking, I don't know if this is the Eastern way of thinking or just maybe the pre-modern way of thinking, is actually the opposite. That when we exhaust our subjective capacities, we just reveal the extent of our finitude in relationship to objective reality. In other words, like we become humble to the fact that like the world is so much bigger than us, and so much there's so much more to it than we could have imagined. Now you can call that the world, you can call it God, you can call it being, but it's like when we subjectively arrive at a truth, we're not raised above reality. We're precisely brought to our finitude in relationship to it. And
Yeah,
I think that's a really important lesson of Marx and Marxism, because if you really think about it, the first example of this, the thing we're talking about, is Marx himself. Marx, um, I mean, he reached the pinnacle, the height of thought itself at the time, which was Hegelian philosophy, which he mastered. And Marx was brought to the very humbling conclusion that the real truth of this thought, this subjective truth, if you will, or absolute knowledge or whatever, the real truth of that was something that already existed in reality, which was the proletariat. It was and of all things, the proletariat, right? Like of all things, the most kind of destitute, landless, and kind of
yeah. I mean, there's some extent to which I feel as if when people make or like Marx's own like criticisms of Hegel and things like that, I wonder how much of it is like filtered through because like Marx isn't the same generation of Hegelians, but like this is like going down the line of apostolic succession or whatever of Hegelianism. That
Mhm.
like a lot of like the people who came after Hegel kind of aren't they aren't Hegel himself, so they are like I wonder how much of like certain parts of it were emphasized or not in his own education, because that's how I've like interpreted Hegel generally, right? Because like the like he says like the like the like reality is like the ultimate principle, like
Yeah.
that's the whole point, like no matter what, uh
Yeah, it remains to really be known if I think the reason I think it's really Hegel's philosophy of right and the way in which people were using it that for Marx represented that Hegel got himself into like a problem, you know?
kind of, but it's like it's not Hegel so much as like the fact that like
The
Hegel
way it
wrote
was
and then
being
there's like 50 more years, like
yeah.
then like
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I do think, Marx did arrive at something unique. Wasn't just
yeah,
like
what he does it, what I think, what Marx it like the bigger thing is that Marx is bringing Hegel into like conflict with the school of like British empiricism, and like
mm,
British and like political economy. Like that's like there's like a general long like pretty interesting just intellectual history of things passing back and forth between like Germany and England, like just in like the Reformation too, where like you could think of like Calvinism versus Lutheranism as a sort of dialectic and things like that.
mhm.
That I think is like what is the most influential thing about Marx is like that straddling that line.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, I think it's kind of sad to see like I don't know. I don't want to keep shit talking Amy, especially kind of rude. Like she's not even
No,
here to
I
defend
want to
herself.
actually. I just like wish you would like try harder.
Yeah,
It's like just like if you like. I'm not. I think that she has like her heart in the right
yeah,
place.
yeah,
Generally, but it's just like, and I see this happen with a lot of people. But it's like if you want to be like a writer and like produce like new insights into this sort of stuff, and like you're devoted to this in like a real sense, and not just kind of in a like sitting back and like just like doing whatever gets a lot of retweets and stuff. Like it's just it that just seems like I'm bored of talking about how Western leftists are fucking bullshit or whatever. And it's like, frankly, it's like if you can't produce something better than what they're producing, you're just like
yeah.
being like
What I was gonna
so
say is, it's
ultra.
like I just find it weird how because I don't know. I've known about her tweets, her Twitter presence for like a few years. So I've known like I've not been a podcast guy, but I know like the limited extent of like her criticisms and how much like especially like the war and shit, which to be fair, she called that shit, right? Like she talked
Yeah,
about
no,
how like
no, she's like that. All
yeah.
that stuff is like
But
she was like totally on point for a lot of stuff. But the
yeah,
thing is like
but one of the things that kind of disappoint me is it's like how do you come to a conclusion of like left com end notes type of you know what I mean? Like isn't that exactly like I remember like she was always so critical of these like ultra left schools and like anarchists and like Chaz, but it seems like it's come full circle and now like she's adopted this kind of position of these end notes, left com type of people. I don't see how those people are like in any way representing the working class. I think it's just a complete defeatism. It's just that's like the
Yeah,
white
it's
flag of
just
defeatism. You know?
yeah, it's like kind of just like nihilism. And nihilism is really popular, and it's like probably the biggest problem that we have to confront. I think is just like nihilism. So there is
Yeah.
a sense also. I think a lot of these people like post leftists going into like kind of like conservative thought or whatever, like kind of being like disenchanted with the Western left, then like are like, oh, like I also like I'm disenchanted with the everything historically that has ever been called the
Yeah.
left
That's
or something like
that's
that.
exactly it. And it's like at what point this was I guess I would pose this question to her if I had a chance to talk to her. I would just ask, at what point is everything fake and a farce? Like, for example, the kind of traditional family life that you find so human and anything, any substantive content of humanity whatsoever. What's to say that this too isn't just some kind of like trick of capital so and for the bourgeoisie to reap? Because left comms will, I mean, it logically follows from the views of left comms that things like the family are, much everything we consider substantively human are just like the result of capital and the result of the bourgeoisie. And like, like at what point do you lose the ability to reference what capital took away? Like, what substantive humanity has capital taken away in the first place if everything is just capital? If
Fake,
everything's the
yeah.
bourgeoisie and everything's capital, like why should anyone, you know what I mean? Like all this populism that Amy seemed to like support, I don't see how leftcom thinking is compatible with populism. Like the whole
It's
what they
not.
what they say is that like, oh, populism is just another expression of bourgeois, democratic, uh, you know, um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like it's just like like this is like a I've been reading a lot of I was like rereading some Marx and Engels stuff like the letters and like because I wanted to read Marx's writing on China and like his coverage of that stuff. But so I was stumbling into a bunch of other stuff. But like him writing about the critical critics or whatever, like he has this whole thing of like calling them the critical critics, like the double critics, like the super critics, the ultra critics or whatever, like being like and their inability to have like a substantive project because of this sort of pathology of just like if you can just like that's the unhappy consciousness as we've been saying. It's like if you don't have any vision of like there being any sort of positive project or good in the world, like you're like basically like in this sort of warped gnostic cosmology where like the only escape is just through your like pure subjective rejection of things.
and to be clear, it's not just Amy. Like I've spent the past like few years witnessing people that I thought were like super end up in this trap of one-sidedness where it's like, I mean, you have to think about like how do things that like Marxists would call revisionism and whatever opportunities, how do those things happen? It happens because there's a lack of a kind of dialectic insight. There's a lack of an ability to keep hold of the essence of things. And this kind of one-sidedness leads people to conclusions that completely betray the essence of their original position. And
Yeah, I think it comes out of a
I
lack of
think
humility.
that is the story of the post left in general. I think that's like what explains them. Like they've just come full circle and they've gotten themselves into like a trap.
Well, they're effectively like this already happened in the 20th century, and this is where the neocons came from. Like it's not
Yeah,
really that
true.
weird. Like this, it's like this has just already happened before many times. It's like a pretty standard cycle in American politics, actually. And it's like really sad because most of the time, like it's like warping people's desires to do something that would actually be good, but just like to defend. The fucking national security state, like you end up being like you learn to love Big Brother basically. It's like this that's like you could say
Well,
that's
I
sort
think
of the
with the
story, right?
neocons, what kind of happened was like they ended up realizing like, oh, it's about Western civilization and the Judeo-Christian legacy that makes possible Marxism and communism in the first place. And
Yeah,
like,
but that's all fake. Like they even admit that. Like that's all they like say like this is like just the noble lie we're telling. Like they take a lot of inspiration from some parts of Plato that other people don't read, specifically about like the Nocturnal Council in the book The Laws, which is like basically what the CIA is like the conception of like the Nocturnal Council.
wow, I've never heard of
But
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's like Strauss. Yeah, if you read like this is like that was their big thing is like you have to have like this Machiavellian nocturnal council who's like cloaked from other people's not like the public's knowledge of what they're doing, but because they're working for their ultimate good.
I have another question for you. Um, so I see you talking about the tradition of Commonwealth as opposed to
Yeah,
what else? And I was thinking, Commonwealth to me is very similar to res publica, right? Or
it is.
it's very
Yeah.
and beyond res publica, it's also very similar to other denotations of like common civilization you find in other cultures. I mean, I guess maybe in the Islamic context it would be like the caliphate or something, and then in
Hmm.
China it would be like, some kind of, I don't know what they would call it in China, but all of these cultures seem to have some kind of like common an acknowledgement of just like a common good, right? That is
Yeah.
instantiated in the form of the polity.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But like, can you imagine like otherwise? Like, I guess this is sort of the racist argument is that like oh, other cultures' conceptions of the common good are like so diverged from ours that like they're not even the same, similar, or they don't contain like the same sort of things.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I guess my question would be though, like, what actually distinguishes the Commonwealth, the English Commonwealth, from these other kinds of? Because for example, like in history, there's every kind of mate polity and has some kind of common good, right? So if we understand what distinguishes Commonwealth, maybe we have a better idea of like America, right? And American soul.
Yeah. Well, basically, like the Commonwealth is the notion that like that it is just identical. It was like how they translated the republic into like English, basically, right? Because like republic, res publica, like this is a Latin term, but like when it was like the English laymen or whatever, like the Commonwealth men and who like fought for Cromwell and stuff, their whole notion was that every like all the people in the government like should be capable of like governing essentially, right? And like they're like so not only are you like was this had to do a lot with like land reform and stuff, but it was like it had a lot to do with the this is like where the Chartists and stuff come from too, like the like wanting universal suffrage and things like that. So that's like where a lot of our tradition comes from in like the this is like where socialism and all of this stuff comes from, right? Is like people talking about like how do you manage the Commonwealth and things like this. Like what like you have to like first like produce the Commonwealth so that like that is the state that you have, right? And there were times like Massachusetts, for instance, is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's not technically a state because it's been a Commonwealth longer than it was a state.
You know, I saw a tweet you retweeted that said, and the notion of Commonwealth contrasts with the Machiavellian neo-Roman views. You know specifically what that's referring to? I think I have an idea. Um,
Well, this is like a big change. Like this is like a development that happens in like the like Anglo or like British imperial like party system, um, where it's like a long story. Like it's all and it has its own like dialectic within it, right? Like there's like that's so it's like hard to give like a really short summation on that. But basically, like there's just a difference in the way the political economy works between who are called the Commonwealth men, and like you can trace their tradition to like the Chartists, but also to like the Whigs, mostly like more of the and like but in America there were like the radical Whigs or like the true Whigs is what they called themselves. And this was like from what's his name? Like Gordon and Trenchard wrote this book called Cato's Letters, which was like their this was like this is like the text that really informed most American political thinking at the time of the Revolution. But there was this other school of like that kind of comes out of like the British East India Company, um, of like political economics, political calculation, and that's like sort of where all of these like technocratic notions come from. Like for instance, like neoliberalism is itself like over 100 years old as a name, because like you go back to like the Peelites, and this is like Bentham's friends and stuff, like trying to institute the panopticon and doing like police reforms. Um, they were like they considered themselves like progressive liberals, right? Like they were like, we have to, we're like, we're the man. They a sort of nocturnal council idea too, right? Where they're like, we are sort of like the vanguard of the people, so we have to like manage these things, and we have to manage them, and like, you know, it's, we can't ask the people, because if we let the people manage it themselves, they'd fuck it all up, right?
So
So
yeah, it sounds to me that the basic distinction is this. You can sum it this way. So with the notion of commonwealth, you have some kind of like economic social contract, if you, where people are given a piece of the pie, kind of govern themselves, right, to be a part of it. Whereas
yeah,
like the Neo-Roman view or whatever, Machiavellian, I don't know what we call it, the political economy, you have a kind of more central government which treats people as things. It treats them as kind of
yes,
like an object of administration towards some kind of unknowable end. Do you think that's like kind of
yeah, yeah. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, yeah. So that you can also see like in the seeds of that, right? Where like our sort of things that are closer to communism in America establish themselves in libertarianism, because
mm,
they're like very skeptical of this notion of like they hate like the current government, right? Because they call it communism, because they imagine communism as this like central dictating like
yeah,
force
yeah,
that like determines what you're doing and treats you like an object, etc. And they're like correct to diagnose our situation as that, and it's, and like they're correct in so many ways. They're just misled by like parts of the like conservative like military establishment to like be anti-communist for foreign policy ends, you know, like
yeah. And
but you know, they're not wrong to like hate what they're calling communism. And the thing is that what they're calling communism is just like progressive liberal imperialism.
well, that's the thing, is that a lot of people don't realize that even if you go as far as back as Marx, um, Marx was pretty clear that I think we discussed this before, but Marx was critiquing the kind of universalism of the bourgeois state, according to which um, humanity has no existence but an abstract kind of existence. That and that, as a matter of fact, capitalism was just the expression of this fact. It's not like when Marx critiqued private property, and this is actually we should address this because I remember that tweet, and then this dumb fuck like quote tweeted, and he's like, "Oh yeah, what Marx wanted was more kulaks." And this guy's, so there's a few things to break down with like how fucking stupid those like podcasters or Chapo people, what they were saying. So it's important to understand that you have to read Marx's critique of private property very carefully. Marx doesn't critique private property in the sense of, you know, he has some kind of perverse desire to like make everyone a singular object of one will. Marx actually recognizes in private property some kind of estranged human, I guess, essence. And part of that, insofar as it relates to the relationships between other human beings, some of the things we associate with private property, such as like independence, dignity, even privacy, honor, those things for Marx are precisely destroyed by the institution of private property. So and when Marx critiques private property, he's not so much critiquing quote unquote kulaks, like these kind of like peasant independence. He's critiquing the centralizing and universalizing institution uh, instantiated in the state of private property. He's not critiquing the essence of private property, which for him is something human, objectively human and real. He's critiquing the private property as an institution. So it's almost like Marx is critiquing what Americans think of as communism, right? The second thing,
Exactly.
just like one last thing, is we need to be very clear with these fucking people because they're trying to rewrite history when they say kulak, right? The kulak was not some kind of like independent peasant who was moderately well off. Those were the middle peasants. And in the debates in the late 20s during the Soviet Union, there were three factions. So there was Bukharin, who was wagering on the kulaks, who were like the top 10% of peasants, very wealthy, and they were very parasitical, right? There was Trotsky, who was wagering on the poor peasants, who were also a minority. They pretty much had nothing. And, they were almost like destitute, like very, very poor peasants, right? And that's where these fucking breadtube podcasters are coming from. They are wagering on like the marginal and the very poorest of the poor, right? But Stalin's position was the middle peasant. And the middle
Yeah,
peasant was the overwhelming majority of peasants. And they were not kulaks, they were middle peasants. And that was the subject of Stalinism. So
yeah,
they're trying to basically say that the peasantry as such are kulaks, which is
yes,
the exact opposite of the experience in history. The what they're just fucking trying to discuss in so many words, basically prove that they're just fucking Trotskyists. They're Trotskyists who hate the peasantry from the
yes.
perspective of urban urban and rationalistic modernity. You know.
Yeah, because they're just like this object that's in the way. Because they like none of these people are actually working class people, or very rarely are they. Or if they are, their ascent has been through adopting this sort of like progressive liberal, like Trotskyite, like kind of like Anglo socialist, like Fabian democratic socialist. This sort of perspective. This is like what they've cultivated their like social capital as, like going into like university or whatever. This is like such a fucking common story. So like to them, like their note that like the peasantry is actually in their way, because they want to just be able to direct, like they're imagining themselves when they're crafting their policies in their minds or whatever, as like just like directing people around, and they're like, oh, these people, right, these people wouldn't just like do whatever they're told,
Well,
to do.
and I think they're trying to gaslight us as to the. I think this is a something I would say is that Marx's proletariat was inevitably going to merge and alter the peasantry. In other words, there was always a peasant element to the proletariat itself. If you look at how Marx talks about the proletariat, he speaks of them in a redemptive sense that they are. It's almost like they are peasants struggling to reacquire land. They are a dignified humanity that's lost everything, but which is reacquiring its humanity, right? But what these people think Marx is talking about is some kind of like marginal, even lumpen or criminal. I don't know what they imagine. A Brooklyn hipster who's like disaffected because they got kicked out of their suburban house with their parents. Like that's not what Marx is talking about. In fact, the proletariat Marx and Engels talk about is in ways profoundly culturally conservative. Engels talks about how the proletariat puts up signs saying thieves will be shot on sight. Things
Yeah,
like that, like things that these people would assume was like kulak type behavior, which is this kind of sense of independence and discipline and honor and things like that. Like that those were asked. The proletariat was not just some kind of monstrous depravity. It wasn't just some kind of like mass of lumpen, slum dwelling criminals and, marginalized people. The proletariat was um a class that was
they're the salt of the earth.
yeah,
Like they're
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. It's
like
almost like they're the salt of the earth, but who were displaced from their earth. If that makes sense. And are
yeah, they've
struggling
like
to
they're
reacquire it and struggling to recapture it, right?
yeah,
That's the
and the reason
redemptive and then
yeah, no,
what
this is like
happens yeah, and
yeah,
what happened in the 20th century more or less was that the proletariat merged again with the peasantry. It was revealed that the proletariat, I mean, like that's why when we speak of the working class today, we're referring to like a peasantry in America, right? But it is also, I think I would argue, it is also the proletariat Marx was talking about. It's just that this proletariat um reacquired some kind of like peasant existence, but an existence that was fundamentally altered by the proletarianization, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like they're who are they? They're the people who bear like the brunt of all of this. You know, like they're the people who bear the fucking cross of like all of this sort of like everything that happens in the state or whatever. So like that's like part of the reason why like this class of like Western leftists, especially they don't really like they're not usually of this class of people
Yeah,
themselves.
it's because they only recognize the proletariat as something negative. They think the proletariat just means like people who are poor and people who are mad and disaffected with life. But I mean, that's just not the case. That also refers to declassed like criminal elements that Marx does not consider. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
like the lumpen doesn't just include like criminals, but it's also like fucking like hack journalists and shit
well,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
you
I
know?
mean, it's today like the lumpen would be like
And
killer,
actors.
like yeah, or like killer clown psychos who have just gone crazy and just complete psychotic, deranged people.
No, I
Um,
think the lumpen are like I do think that like you look at the I would call like the project of Chapo Trap House. Why is it called Trap House? Like why is it affecting this? Like it's already affecting this lumpen veneer of
and
like we're in the fucking trap house.
you know what's pathetic is that within, for example, American black culture, there is a genuine, authentic national element, like
Yeah,
a genuine culture, real soul, right? So a lot of like black culture and music, it seems like it's only lumpen, whatever, but it's not. It's also giving expression to an authentic
yeah. Well,
national
do you know what?
soul and
So
reality.
here's the
But
irony, right?
here's the thing with Chapo. Chapo literally just abstracts the element of like criminality from the soul and from like the national. So they are the Chapo is literally like the true lumpen like cultural
Yes.
platform.
Yeah, it is. This is what we've been saying for forever. I mean, we were calling them the lumpen bourgeois for like years ago, even. But that's like what it is. And as you were saying, there is like this element of like authentic culture and like let's say like rap music, like celebrates ostensibly like the trap house and like drug dealing and criminality and stuff. But that's not true. Like that's true of like what like record producers are like funding very
Hmm.
specifically. You know, it's not like
That's
and
very
like
true. And even then, even in the
two
cases where it
white
is,
teenagers, right?
yeah, even in the case where it is though, it's like um the fact of running afoul with the law is a part of the reality because the law doesn't respect the sovereign. It's like that in any case where you have one nation occupying another. One of the forms of not resistance, but just inevitable things that are going to result is a lack of respect for laws. I mean, they're not your laws, and it's a form of resistance to disrespect the law when the law does not represent you. You know. Um, and also, I mean, a lot of the times there's tragical element. Like, not necessarily that this is like all good shit. It's just like this is life. This is the struggle of life, and all of those like things. Chapo Trap House, like let's be fucking woke and just be like they are literally fucking that like that is cultural appropriation.
Yeah, that's what it
It's
is. Like,
it is a
really.
genuine sense of like appropriating and whitewashing that, you know?
Yeah,
Um so
100%. And the thing is that it's like it's also like this is why like they don't appreciate that there's also like in what if you want to call it white culture or like white working class culture, they fundamentally can't understand that stuff either. Like
oh yeah,
they
yeah.
make
That's what I'm saying. It's
mistakes.
like that's why they're so parasitical because they're trying to steal black culture and and that abstraction is all they have. They are literally just like this lumpen parasitical
Yeah,
class. It's these like Brooklyn podcasters or whatever the fuck these Chapo people. It's like
basically you can look at it like this, man. So it's like you can like the Democrats are the real racist thing is like also true. So
yeah, I agree.
in this sense, right, like they have this notion of like the cool black gangster or whatever, and like this is a guy who's like too cool to like be involved with anything and like doesn't really care or whatever, and like does drugs and is like really cool, whatever, has a fan club, etc.
Yeah.
And this is like their notion. This is their notion of like authenticity, or like this is their conception of the proletariat. And it's like them imagining themselves as being like that person. And then so like they can't recognize like oh like Johnny Cash is basically the same thing as a rapper, or like there's like country musicians, there's like this whole
Yeah,
other
yeah,
element of
very
like
true.
white working class culture, which is the exact same. Like it's literally like just a twin growth in American culture, um expressing like the same sentiments in like in the forms that are like pretty much identical. Like you listen to like a talking blues album or whatever, and it's like this is just it's all just rap, or like
Yeah,
early
and
like
and and they
Dylan sounding like
but the
folk
reason they
albums.
they shy away from that is because they're trying to avoid the real meaning of these things, which is their authentic working class origins. They want to turn it into something that justifies their lumpen. So it's almost like they're trying to use other people to justify their own like social depravity.
Basically, yeah, and like like they're constantly bragging about like when they're on tour, they're like, oh yeah, we're doing so much coke and ketamine, and we're going clubbing, and it's just like you're this is a podcast for the working class. Like, is this
That's
what
that's
like
what
the
that's what
working
I mean.
class fucking thinks? Like,
It's like here's the thing. I don't have a problem with people having a good time in their own way, but the way Chapo like just see here's the thing. This is what you got to think about. When you're
the
in a
working class
political
smokes weed and drinks beer
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
fucking
When you're in a
lake,
when you're in a working when you're in a sorry, when you're in a political or theoretical state of mind, you're in a reflexive state. You're not like expressing yourself spontaneously. You're doing it in a reflexive way, right? And then when you're enjoying yourself, it's not really reflexive. It's more spontaneous, authentic, and whatever. What I find so cringe about Chapo is the way they conflate these two things. So that when they're tweeting about like, oh yeah, I'm doing coke and going clubbing and shit, they're making a fucking political and ideological statement intentionally, like a very reflexive, calculated statement to try and like pretend to be a certain style. And to me, that's why when I first heard about Chapo, like when I first heard about them, I was like, okay, I'll give them a listen on YouTube. Like, I'm like, what do these people sound like? Because I heard about the dirtbag left in Chapo, so I was assuming that these people sound like working class, like super down to earth, like. And I listened to them, and they fucking sound like nerds. They sound like very stiff, uh, nerds who are not
it's
spontaneous,
mixed.
very
It's mixed.
smug, ironic, and just like it's like how the fuck is this? What kind of fucking like fake appearance are these people putting on? I see right past this shit.
Well, the thing is that they launder like there are like the working class element of the show was like Amber and Matt Christman. Those are two people. They both came from like working class backgrounds. But part of like what the show is like laundering and they're also the only people with anything of substance to say that isn't just like riffing on like stereotypes or whatever. Which is like what Felix does, and Felix is very funny at doing that. But Felix comes from perhaps the wealthiest lineage out of all of them. He's from fucking like Hyde Park royalty in
Yeah,
fucking Chicago. So, and like Menaker is like from like publishing aristocracy essentially, and so like they're not actually like those two particularly aren't, and like Virgil is not like a working class type of kid either. So there you could even see like these sorts of splits within the show. Like you could do a sort
yeah.
of mini class
I mean,
analysis
I
there.
guess yeah. I guess I thought I was gonna be listening to like authentic Jimmy Dore type people who just talk how but no, they're I when I listened to them, I fucking I was hearing very reflexive kind of like just like if you showed me this was a podcast of like graduate student nerds, I would not be able to tell the difference, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's the same class. I mean like that's it's all the same. These people like their world is like a very small set of cities. Like like you just look at like where they go and like what they conceive of as like the country. They're not in like they have no interest in the vast majority of America, and they're actually more interested in some ways in like British politics than they
Yeah, I
are
noticed
in
that too.
than in understanding like where like the real history of like like they'll write off someone like Ron Paul as being like they'll just be like he's a neo-Nazi or something. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's more
There's also
complicated than
like
that.
yeah, I mean that's the American left is very like Anglophile. It's very much like fascinated with like British aesthetics and Oscar Wilde, and it's just yeah.
Yeah, it's just like that's why people in America like associate like communism with this sort of like aristocrat, like this sort of like it's like kind of like British really, and it's because it is like in America, like that's yeah,
You know,
they're all like Woodrow Wilson progressive.
here's some stuff, some paradoxes that I want to talk about. So I watched a speech by Ron Paul the other day of him in Congress. He's just like talking about he's going against the neocons. It was like in the 90s. And I was like, God damn, this motherfucker was really like this is really a subversive and dangerous
Yeah,
person. You know? And I get everything you were saying, but I was trying to think about a certain historical irony, which is how the fuck did it come to this? Because the school of thought he represents, like he's an Austrian or whatever, right?
kind of.
That doesn't that come from a very kind of like elitist, aristocratic,
Yeah,
like European lineage of like the Austrian, aristocrats who were a reaction against, you know what I mean?
yeah, there are like these weird ironies as to how that became a sort of populist um uh like it has a lot to do with like bimetallism in like the 19th century, and like the gold standard was considered like or was like advertised in some ways as like a populist thing. It's a pretty complicated question, like how that arises in American history. Like American
Well,
history is like super
it's
unique
ironic
too in that
because
sense.
the first populists were against the gold standard. But now it
Yeah,
seems like the populists, like Ron Paul, they made their whole career off of back.
well, the question is like about like the bank, right? And like Ron Paul's against the Fed, and the Fed is like definitely like bad. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like and like so in some sense there's like a way in which I've been thinking that like communism in America will be implemented through like strict constitutionalism. So like imagine like like if we actually wanted to like have communism, and we were like, okay, step one, we're going to eliminate like all departments of the state that like don't exist in the Constitution. So what are you doing there? Like you're getting rid of most like 99.9% of like the military industrial complex like overnight if you were to do that, right? So like and like I think you actually do have to do that before you could start implementing like policies that would be for the public good in such a way that the public would feel as if they are owning it and it's not being imposed upon them,
yeah.
because it right now is being imposed upon them, right? Like
No,
we
no,
like
I
you know what I
definitely,
mean?
no, no, no. I mean, like, here's the thing. What I know from dialectics is that yes, this kind of return to the roots and the origins, and this kind of like leveling of the American state. This is what a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of Marxists don't get this. Is that when the like this is how Lenin distinguished himself, right? So this is why one-sided thinking is such a problem. So let's say you were in Russia, right, in the early 1900s, and you're thinking, okay, the basic Marxism 101 is that the bourgeoisie has to win power, and then this will open the space for the proletariat, right? And then the logical conclusion is, okay, let's just trail behind the liberal big bourgeoisie in the cities, and then it'll be our turn, right? We just wait our turn.
Yeah.
But then Lenin comes and he says, no, the real fundamental class distinctions are happening in the countryside between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And that in the countryside, even this is it's not yet elaborated in the form of Mao's primary and secondary contradictions, but it's super interesting. So Lenin says the this peasant mass, almost as a whole, irregardless of its internal class antagonisms, represents a popular, democratic, petite bourgeois element, which the urban proletariat must enter into an alliance with. In other words, the seed of the bourgeoisie, the essence of the bourgeoisie, is also in the countryside too. But so you'd think, oh, so why not just support the city bourgeoisie? If the essence of the bourgeoisie is in the countryside, then what's the difference? Because it's precisely because there's a difference between the essence and the appearance, or the content and the form. Like the very real material essence of the bourgeoisie is being reproduced in the countryside. And this will be our opportunity. As this will only be the proletariat's opportunity to seize hegemony, which is going to be in this class differentiation that's going on among the peasants. Um, so it's like there's a dual revolution going on. There's on the one hand, there's the internal class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. And then on the other hand, there's this wider struggle going on between the establishment in the cities and and the people in the countryside. And that Mao finally goes even further than Lenin, and he says even the urban proletariat are not necessarily revolutionary. It's just the peasantry. The site of the real class struggle is going to happen among the peasantry. And meanwhile, the peasantry is the revolutionary force in regards to the establishment. So by returning to the essence, you clear the way. And I think that's how I interpret the Ron Paul thing. By returning to the essence of constitutionalism or whatever, you are returning to the very seed out of which this like horrific big government was able to emerge. But that is not the same as supporting the current established big government itself.
Yeah. No, like the thing that like the thing is that Ron Paul is
It's
like
it's a it's
pretty much.
it's a fresh start. It's like a new opportunity. Like yes, it is the very same constitution that gave rise to the current big government. But by returning to the constitutionalist origins, you are repeating. I got Zizek writes in his repeating Lenin. He's talking about Deleuze's repetition. When you repeat something, you're not actually just reproducing the same thing. Repetition is the site of novelty. So
I was I was
that's the
thinking
way.
Ron Paul's relation to the state also is sort of like in the kind of like dialectical sense that like the Bolsheviks were or whatever, where he's like, yeah, like I'm participating in this, but what he does is he mostly vetoes or like votes against everything. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
he's like there, but like he's like on strike kind of in a way.
yeah.
Like I don't know what the last thing he voted for was. But I think that like say like we had the whole party like just taking up more and more space devoted to that Ron Paul line of voting against every single thing until like everything that was like all of these unconstitutional things or whatever were dissolved. So it's just like you just keep like that is one way in which this could actually manifest itself is just like by like not having like an activist participation, but creating like a party that's essentially like a party on strike to
Well,
like just
here's
like
the thing.
you
I
know.
really I do think there's a lot of limits to Ron, and again, it's almost like it all comes back to a lack of dialectics. Like I think we should also really assess why Ron Paul failed. We should have a
Oh yeah,
fair,
no, I'm
yeah,
not saying to like emulate everything he says, but what I
yeah,
mean is,
yeah.
I think that like the people that were motivated by that are like these are the like or like people who listen to Alex Jones or things like this. Like these people are like written off by the like urban elite or whatever. The like bourgeois socialists who
Well,
they're written off entirely.
I'll tell you what our situation is in general, just to give a broader scope. So during the time of Marx and Lenin, we were dealing with a situation of constitutional nation states, right? Bourgeois democracy as we know it. Um, and then after World War II, something peculiar happened, and this was actually Stalin's last speech. Stalin's last speech was in the past, we had the era of the bourgeois democracy. With it, this constitutionalism, guarantee of rights, and all that kind of stuff. And Stalin said, now all of this is being trampled over. This kind of new deep state or imperialism is taking over and casting all of that aside, just like in fascism. And Stalin says something interesting. He says, the task of communists the world over is to um, carry on the banner of the former bourgeois democracy and defend in almost in a conservative way that kind of sounds like Ron Paul, defend this old rights and so on and so on. So we have to really understand that the reason Ron Paul is so subversive and potentially revolutionary is because what warrant did the American state have to grow into what it became? Like, what right did it have to do that? It has no fucking legitimacy. It has zero fucking warrant. It has zero sanction. It has zero right. It has zero legitimacy. It's this monstrous deep state that did not consult the foundation of the state, the social contract. It transgressed the bounds of the Constitution, and it's basically a kind of like an illegitimate state in a way,
Yeah,
right? So,
absolutely.
regardless of the question of whether um now the question is there a material being to this kind of like supplement to bourgeois democracy? Yes, obviously there is, but we can only actually arrive at it. We can only arrive at it as something like for itself by returning to the origins, returning to the roots, and establishing a state, uh, establishing a real people state in a determinate way. In other words, like it's almost
That's
like
how the
communism
American
would be
Revolution
the
happened.
it's almost like communism would be the self-consciousness of the current American empire. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying like as you were like laying out, I'm saying this is how the American Revolution actually happened, right? Is that the Americans they said like we're being denied our like ancient liberties, like we're being
Yeah,
denied our
the
liberties
rights of
as
Englishmen.
Englishmen. That's why we have to become Americans.
Yeah, yeah, and that
So
you
I'm
know
saying
what?
this is like we're being denied like the American Republic, our liberties, our traditions have been denied. That is why we must become
A
communists.
lot of people don't know this. A lot of people think that the American Revolution was just a few old guys coming together and deciding that the institution of monarchy was unjustifiable, and then they just decided to leave. But that's not what happened. They were very conservative, saying the Parliament, the British Parliament, had no sanction. It had no justifiable right according to English tradition. It had no right. And that the only way we could preserve the old, real English tradition is by becoming Americans, by no longer becoming Englishmen. And that's actually the real dialectic of revolution. Revolutions do not happen when you ex nihilo say the world is illegitimate and I'm going to conquer the world based on what I think is right. Actually, that's a pathology that mirrors fascism when you think about it.
Yeah,
And in Italy and Germany, fascists did not draw from any prior legitimacy. They just said, you know what, might is right. We're just going to take power and do what we want. And when I see a lot of leftists in America assume this same mentality, like it's the same thing, this is just a displaced form of psychological fascism. In reality, communists in America will have to be very similar to people like Ron Paul and have to actually trace the determinate origins of the internal contradictions of the American state. And the first most obvious form of that contradiction is with regard to the betrayal of America's own institution, the betrayal by America's institutions with its own founding document, the Constitution. The U.S. government is infringing upon the civil liberties that it had promised and guaranteed
yeah,
to its citizens in the form of the Constitution. And communists just act like that it's not like, oh, who cares? It's just bourgeois democracy. But bourgeois democracy does not you don't overcome bourgeois democracy by independently arriving at a better system. Bourgeois democracy is overcome because of its determinate internal contradictions. And this internal contradiction is very evident in the contradiction between the imperialist American empire and deep state with the Constitution.
yeah. I mean, this is like my thing. Like, I have no problems these days because, like, I mean, I kind of come out of a similar like devotion to a lot of like what Ron Paul stood for in like 2008 when I was like much younger, and because like my whole thing is like owning my own stuff. Like, I want to have my own. I want to have a house. I want to be able like to own my own means of production. Right. Like I want to have like a little workshop and like I want to be able to build things, you know, or like I would like to be involved in a community where like say I could like rent out access to like industrial machinery so I can like build furniture or things like that. Like these are the sorts of things that like I'm like kind of like into like tinkering and like, you know, building stuff. And I always got along with people like that, or like, you know, engineer, tinkerer, like DIY kind of like open source type people or people and like right to repair people like The people who are just like really interested in like they're like I own this thing, like I own this car. I want to be able to like know how it works and I want to be able to like fix it myself and I want to be able to like fabricate the pieces I would need to fix this myself. And this is all stuff libertarians want. Like this is what they actually want if you talk to them. They want these sorts of liberties around like their own means of production and over like some aspects of their consumption, which they're denied now. And like it's like libertarians. They're totally right to consider the fact that like if you grow like if you like make a loaf of bread or something, and you want to go just like into the town park and you're like putting up the little stand and you're selling your bread, like the that a cop could come over and be like, "Do you have a business license?" Like that is like a like why is that? You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
think in communism, why would there be any problem with that? So
and
my whole point is like communism to like the way that we should be talking about it is like it is what would and it would mean about owning more things. It would mean that you would have more property. It means that you would have like it's not about losing anything. It's there's only things to gain.
well,
Like you
this is
don't have to
what
give something up like aesthetically in this
people
sort
don't
of like
understand, that for Marx, private property is inexorably bound up with state institutions. Um, Marx does not actually talk about the objective essence of private property in the sense of like private property being something beyond something that's given recognition in the form of the state. So when Marx, so it's like some people would be like, "Oh, that's just the petite bourgeoisie fantasy," but no, the petite bourgeoisie for Marx and Marxists historically wasn't simply what you're talking about is like a basic humanity of like the peasants and just humanity in general, whereas the petite bourgeoisie may have feigned some kind of independence, and the biggest examples of the petite bourgeoisie that were used at the time was the urban petite bourgeoisie, like the small shop owners and craftsmen, but they fundamentally relied upon the centralizing order of the states that they lived in at the time. Like it wasn't just like that; these were people like doing their own thing. They fundamentally were given recognition, and so they were premised their existence by some kind of recognition. So this thing you're talking about, I think a lot of Marxists don't understand. That was given for Marx. What I'm trying to say, like
yeah.
the
Marx is actually
ability
much
for a
more of
human
like a
being,
normal guy
yeah,
than people like
the
also
ability
talk
for a
about.
human being to independently fulfill their existence and live independently, truly freely. I mean, think about the examples Marx gives for communism. Does Marx say that communism is no? Marx and Engels mocked this idea of communism in their critic of Barrack's communism. They were critiquing Düring and Düring's notion of Barrack's communism. If you look at what Marx described about communism, he's like, you fish in the morning, you eat in the afternoon, and you hunt in the. Marx was very, that was given for Marx, that this kind of tinkerer type of thing of the individual fully realizing their abilities,
Yeah,
the expression of their humanity, that was always given for Marx. And even if you go to Lenin, right? If you read Lenin's State and Revolution, Lenin's very libertarian. Lenin says that after the withering away of the state, the way in which social life will be regulated will be based on the mores, the customs, the traditions of people. Common sense. It's almost like some kind of like English conservative.
yeah. One thing I was thinking about I was reading I was reading I read the other day all of Marx's letters to his wife because I'm always interested in that. And Marx actually had like a very good marriage, like and like he's like a big like romantic, like big on monogamy, and like
Oh
like he
yeah.
was like what I
Listen,
mean. And
people don't understand Marx. People would call Marx a fascist today. Let me tell you,
yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah, exactly.
if you read the way Marx talked about the Paris, Marx was all about these fundamental ironies. When Marx talked about the Paris Commune, he talked about the heroism of the women in the Paris Commune, and he described them. He said they were heroic, like they possessed the womanly virtue, like the women of antiquity, like the women you read in ancient Greek tragedies. Like he had this very powerful, almost like today would be considered very reactionary description, which is like evoking this deep kind of primordial sense of honor and virtue, which for Marx is re-emerging in the modern context in the form of the proletariat. Like this idea that Marx was like a Vaush who was just like, oh, like a jellyfish who didn't, care about any of these things. I don't know if anyone has that idea, but it's just not fucking true. Marx would be
Yeah.
considered profoundly
Well,
conservative.
I was thinking how part of like on the like irony like lumpen bourgeois socialist types like they have a thing that they call like wife guys, and I've often been called a wife guy also. Where
Yeah,
you're like where you're like actually like you're like proud of your marriage and things like this. But this is Marx to a T. Marx is
yeah.
totally a wife guy. Like he was very devoted to like well, he was like a real person, like a kind of like a complete human being. He wasn't like it like living like what I mean. Like it's not.
I remember a journalist who went to interview Marx. He was describing when he said Marx strikes me as a very plain, like middle class guy. He doesn't seem like he's like this like he doesn't seem like a Bakunin type of like degenerate.
Yeah,
A very
exactly. Like
plain,
yeah,
normal guy.
yeah. Bakunin is like Vaush, and like
Yeah,
he's like like fucking these like hideous troll looking women, and like
yeah.
like it just like has bad taste and just like smells bad and just like shows up to like say edgy shit that like doesn't make any sense. Like that's Bakunin.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's this is what I try to say is that for all the people who have this Americans have this warped idea of communism and Marxism, I want to ask them this question. I mean, the fact that there's communist states that endured wars and that kind of stuff, you realize those people went through all of the fucking they exhausted the whole breadth of like human reality, whether it's war, tragedy, loss, strife in the family over the need for honor, bravery, all of those like ancient Greek, whatever virtues, all of those classical conservative values. They had to, you know, I don't know, like, for example, just think of like, I don't know, like, the Chinese, the Long March or the war against Japan. Like, do you think these people were just like, liberals or were like woke liberals who were like politically correct? It's like, no, these people were fucking in life and death situations, and they had to deal with actual reality. They had to deal with the actual reality of humanity, like in all its brutality and all of its fucking horror and it's all of its
Yeah,
fucking depth and all of its like ambiguity. Like they
yeah,
went
they're
through
not
all of that.
anti-authoritarians either. Like there's no like that's another thing Marx also talks about. Marx and Engels. I don't know if it was Engels, maybe it was the Engels, but I don't really care. Was
Yeah,
saying that like anti-authoritarianism is just like is a sabotage because like the whole point is for the working class to have authority. Like
yeah,
it's like and it's sort of also similar to like the liberal opposition to like gun ownership and things like that in America. Like the Second Amendment is a deeply you can build communism off of the Second Amendment, and this is sort of why I like closely associated in some ways, or at least I looked up to when I was younger, especially someone like Cody Wilson, because I always saw that implicit in like the notion of and like that's more complicated, and who knows like what the whole purpose of the Ghost Gunner was, or if it's being used for
yeah.
like fucking weird
Um,
CIA shit or whatever,
yeah, I don't.
but.
Yeah, I don't
But
really know who that is or whatever, but
But his whole idea was like,
hold
that
on, hold
you
on,
like,
wait. Hold on. Can you check your Twitter right now?
yeah, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I know, I get it,
yeah,
I get it, I know it's fucking sus and shit. But what I just mean like that sort of maker, like tinkering, like the people attracted to that are the
yeah.
people
No,
who
no, no,
should be
dude.
attracted to
I
communism.
fully. I'm. Don't worry, dude.
Yeah, it's all like I'm like sometimes mystified by like because like I know like there's like weird shit around people that like I talk to, and I'm often like associate with people who end up getting tied into other weird shit. But I think that's like I'm just like open to that sort of stuff, I guess. Like or like looking for the good in that stuff. Like I'm always trying to look for like what the good is in something, even if I'm like very critical of it. So I
Yeah,
think that
yeah,
that sort of project of like 3D printing, 3D printing is something communists should be talking about. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is
yeah. I agree. I agree. Yeah, but instead they want to talk about fucking like Falk or fully automated luxury, and It's the most fucking, like, shameless thing I can think of. It's like, oh yeah, conveniently, like, your specific fantasy, like, the thing that would support your lifestyle the most is, like, universal project of the American people. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, these people, they're not interested in like what normal people are interested in. Like they don't like what a lot of people take pride in America.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, it's really easy when I put things this way. It's really easy for me to show conservatives this like view of communism and shit. But American leftists make it so fucking hard. They make it
Yeah,
so
no, they're
hard.
actually saboteurs. Like
They
they're
are, they
trying.
are, dude. Because like I'll say this shit but look at the reality of the majority of people in America calling themselves like communists and leftists and shit. It's like they're fucking ruining it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's an extent though where like everything begins with like the rectification of names. So I don't know if it's necessarily correct to like give up that framing and to like that's why I think a lot of like these like third positionist type people or whatever, they're like, oh, we have to call it like labor
Oh
nationalism or
yeah,
like
that's
national capitalism, or and it's like
well.
no,
I'm
like
gonna
if
be
we are the authentic, then like we should like this is what I liked about what you've been doing, where you're like, I'm a capital C communist,
yeah.
like put it with the capital, like spell it with the fucking capital, claim it, and just
Well,
like it's going to be ruthless, but we're going to have to like destroy the left.
yeah. I'm gonna be debating a guy on Tuesday. His name is like Keith Woods, and I think
Yeah,
the debate's gonna be about whether China is fascist, and he's arguing it's fascist because
yeah. Okay, so I've already been arguing with him, right? So he's citing A. James Gregor, and you just need to look into this guy's biography because he just set up like he set up like a eugenics institute. Like his actual
Jesus.
project is rehabilitating the term fascism because they're all fucking the actual fascists.
It's like how can there be fascism without um using the state as an arm to reboot the military industrial complex? And like, how is there fascism without that? Has there ever been an example of fascism that wasn't a military, chauvinistic military project?
Well, like basically what they'll look at is they'll say like their whole thing is defending Hitler. Like I'm not kidding. Like this is all they care about. If you start arguing with them, it's going to come down to like World War II historiography and who the quote unquote capitalists were supporting. So their whole thing, right, is like, oh, the capitalists are supporting the communists because fascism was actually the real communism.
It doesn't make any sense because it's like, I mean, like, it seems to with the extent of my knowledge is factually wrong, but also, and why would it be in the interests of the communists to like aid? I mean, sorry, why would it be in the interests of why else would there be a fucking move to initiate the German expansionism and this enslavement of Europe, the conquest of Europe? Like, what point would that be if not to serve the aims of the German capitalists?
Well, they're going to make a distinction between when the capitalists, like people like Schacht or whatever, were supporting Hitler, like in the 30s, and then when like things change in like World War II, and like when we start going to war, like the Anglosphere are going to war with them, because they're
Yeah.
gonna point to like basically Hitler printing their own currency. So like that is that was a threat to like international financial control over Germany. So there is a degree to which that dialectic is like correct, and like so that there was a point where it was like they would support Stalin like
Well,
temporarily to
I
like get
get
rid of
that.
Hitler
I
to
get that
then
World War II was definitely a war between rivaling imperialist and capitalist forces, but I don't see like like you have to think about what led it to that point, and I don't see how taking the way in which English capitalists supported the Nazis can be taken out of that, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like the thing is like they're like, but there's also this idea they think like that Hitler at some point had actually had sovereignty or like had the possibility of winning or in any respect, but I don't believe that was
Well,
ever
it's
really
interesting
remotely
because
possible.
like the independent currency is like it's very similar to the EU, you know?
Yeah, Yeah, kind of. It's like it's pretty complicated. I mean, that's the thing is like this sort of debate gets down into like hyper specifics, and they're gonna be annoying and like trying to. They're gonna like say like that. The like for instance, I just kept saying like I'm gonna using the common terms definition of fascism, where it's just like the rule of finance capital. Like it's
Mhm.
just finance capital. That's what fascism is. Like that's why you
Like,
can point at like Goldman Sachs right now and be like that's fascism,
well, here's
and it
another
is.
question I'd have for them is like, how do you explain the businessman's plot?
Yeah,
You know, like
exactly.
Prescott Bush and all of these like super establishment deep state kind of people literally wanted to model America's government off of fascism. Um,
Yeah, ironically, this is also like the kind of more Anglophile wing too, because there are all these like internal dissents between between FDR, Stalin, and Churchill, for instance.
yeah.
Um, where like there's in some ways where FDR was like much closer to Stalin than to Churchill,
Oh yeah.
but and like there was a degree to which like America was like kind of owning the British Empire at that point in World War II, like and afterwards, like during the Suez Canal crisis and things like that, we
Yeah.
were sort of like trying to like have one over on the British Empire. But my contention ultimately is that like the British Empire like ultimately like won. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that and like reclaimed America. And like we even described this time period, and I think it was through like the sort of '60s hippie sort of shit. Like we call it the British invasion, but I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
like not a joke. You know, like that is, and this is sort of what Kubrick it was showing in his films. And it's also something that Thomas Pynchon writes about, right? Like it's something that like I don't think it's absurd. This is like a degree to which LaRouche was actually right about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. He was like obsessed with the British and good reason, I guess.
I no, but I think that that's also if we're saying we're going back to the root, like there is it like we like that's part of like motivating these people is like we don't want like like Alex Jones saying 1776 will commence again. Like I yes,
Yeah,
100% that,
I
100%
agree.
that. Fuck the British, get the Tories out of here. Like fuck
Yeah.
the Anglo financial system that is like that this empire, which is like always been the enemy of the American Republic. Like I think this is a very powerful, and I think it's true.
Yeah. I mean, I think dwelling in this kind of apparent contradiction, like between libertarianism and communism, will produce the correct result. You know,
This is what
once,
like Deng Xiaoping is perfect, the perfect like point to do this on.
yeah, I mean, it's like it's very clear. It's not a question of ideology. Trump could tell people any policy and they would agree with it. They do
Yeah,
not care about
exactly.
like any like eternal principle. But
Yeah. No, if Trump, if the thing is, if Trump was a communist and he was saying all of the, like, and he was like came out and he was like, you know what, guys, like I've become a communist. Like that would just mean that all the Trump fans would become communists.
yeah,
That's all that it would
yeah,
mean.
exactly. You know, this is kind of really off topic, but speaking of LaRouche, he always talks about the so-called Venetian banks, like Venice or whatever.
Yeah, that is a. There's a lot of real history to that, though.
Really,
Yeah,
really, like it always fascinated me because we talk about like the Renaissance. Um, got we've got a sorry, got a message. We got a lot of. We already talked about like the difference between the Machiavellian type of thing. I wonder to what extent that's where it all began. You know?
Based.
well, it begins at the very beginning. Everything's always everything, and so it's like when did anything begin, man? It began with the fucking foundation of the cosmos.
Yeah,
But like you
true.
can trace all of this stuff back like as far as you want. I would say, it begins with fucking Cain and Abel, man.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Very true. Um, thank you, D Solano. Appreciate it. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Did you hear that Biden is starting to like ramp up in Somalia now?
Oh, I'm sure, man. I mean, it's all fuckery now, man. It's carte blanche for fuckery. no one's paying attention anymore. That's the thing, you know. It's like it's a like and it's there's I don't know, man. Like I don't trust a lot of this shit. Like the it's all so fucking sus, man. Like everyone wants to like have an easy path to power, basically, right? So like they're gonna like try to reach out to entrenched powers already, but that's not like a way forward. That's never going to work, and all that's going to do is meaning that like you're going to become instrumentalized by this thing that already exists. So you know you have to actually build an independent like movement, like something that is not connected to, like something that is like actually rejecting the legitimacy of this power structure. That's and like not that's the only way forward. I see all these people and they end up trying to like plug themselves into some pre-existing structure, but all of them don't work. Like something radically new has to happen.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's definitely a complicated. You know, like for example, I'll tell you something. A lot of the people that watch me and listen to me, they come from California of all places. You know, and it seems like, believe it or not, it seems like something's going on in California. Like there's a lot
Yeah,
of
I feel it, man. I'm
yeah.
there.
You live there?
Yeah, I moved to SF, dude. I'm in the belly of the beast now.
Oh shit, you live in
Yeah, no,
crazy.
dude, it's actually been really enlightening to be here because I have I like was just at a party yesterday talking to like people who like work for Facebook and things like that, right? So like I'm talking to like the technocrats, like the two like the sort of they're like the central planners of the American economy, you know, these like the consultants for these sort of like investment banks and things like this. And these people are also, I don't think, outside of the reach of like what you could call radicalization or whatever, because they are they these people in any sort of like they're not bad people. They are very talented people, and they're just directed towards like the ends that they're you know being directed towards. But they have a lot of talent, and these are the sorts of people that you would actually want to like be working in the public good because they have a lot of talent. The problem is that like they're like possibly the most like naive or manipulated class in other respects because by being like afforded like pretty cushy conditions and stuff like that, that doesn't actually afford them like happiness. They're actually usually kind of miserable or sad or like lonely. They're usually like you know they do a lot of like psychedelic drugs and stuff like that, or like they're constantly like working out or trying to like min max in some other respect because they like are alienated too. Like they want they see the like ruin of this country also, and they are just as confused as like anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
definitely see what you're coming from.
but they also like inhabit more purely the ideology than others because they are actually like building it, you know, like they are actually like involved in the process of building like this sort of tech economy and things, right? And they have like they think out their like liberalism or whatever more than say like a Chapo DSA type person. Those people are just like mystifiers, but these people are like committed to like telling what they're very authentic people. You know, they're not
That's just
lying. They're
like
not
crazy
bullshitters.
because California is like known for the opposite.
Well, I
But
mean specifically like coders, like
yeah,
the
yeah,
tech
yeah,
type people. Like they're like they are just talking about like systems. You know what I mean? Like they're
yeah,
very authentic. Like they're not
yeah,
going to lie to you.
yeah,
Really,
yeah.
like
I
if
see
you're
what.
talking to sales guys or something, they'll lie to you. But if you're talking
Yeah,
to engineers, they're not going to lie to you.
yeah, it makes sense. You know, I don't. This is off topic, but Laura Southern is online on Twitch. Do you know who that is?
Oh, dude, trust me, man. Every right wing person, like you might have been more involved with the left, but like I've been like chilling on the right, I guess, for a long time. So I know all of these people like
Should I
way
debate?
too
Should I
well.
try to debate her tonight? Is she doing debates tonight?
Um, I, I don't know, man. She's not very smart. I mean, she's mostly just like you know, she's like a gun girl or whatever. She can stand. She's like you know, like
I'm
she
surprised
plays
she hasn't been like she's on the platform. I would expect her to be on the platform, but
shout themselves out.
yeah. I don't know, man. It's
Debate.
funny.
So
It's
why, yes, if
interesting
you
like
could
who
just
they
hang out for one more
allow a
second.
platform and not. It is kind of arbitrary, like in a very real sense.
yeah.
positive from like a demographic.
I don't know. You could argue with her. I think honestly, like you'd probably have more. You'd
well.
have more productive debates with people on the right than you would with leftists, because leftists are incorrigible and they're hopeless.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, pretty crazy.
Like for instance, did you see Vosh with Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, that was so fucking stupid.
Kirk rolled him. Kirk isn't even that smart, but he's a smarter person. I'd rather have Charlie Kirk on my team than Vosh.
Really?
Yeah, I think Charlie Kirk is like, I think that he is a better person probably in his day-to-day life. I think he's probably like, if he had kids, he'd probably be a good father. You know what I mean? I don't think that's true of Vosh.
So
I would coach a soccer team with fucking Charlie Kirk. I wouldn't coach a soccer team with Vosh.
I can agree with that, definitely. Guys, how do I call in? How do I do it just in case I decide to do that? How would I do it? Like, do you have a number? Or is it through her Discord? I don't want to go on her Discord. Lauren Southern. Said she wants to like debate lefties. Join the wow. You know what's fucking crazy? Samantha.
That would be good content.
Wait,
that would be good content.
Samantha's modding for her? How the fuck is Samantha modding for her? Oh, it's the official Twitch Politics Discord. Oh, you know what? I'm tempted. I'm kind of thinking
I mean, if you're gonna get on that, I will definitely dip out because I just want to watch you do that, frankly. but I just wanted to people in the chat are saying like, I hate that I like Charlie Kirk more than Vosh. No, you shouldn't hate that. That's a correct opinion. Like, that's like, you should like Destiny more than Vosh, because Destiny is a more authentic and like a better person, frankly, than these sorts of leftists. It's so bullshit to like divide things by this sort of ideology. Like, this is something I like about Mao. Like, his whole thing is about like everyone fundamentally is like redeemable. Like, you can reach everyone. Like, I think you have to have that faith, and you have to have like that good. You have to be like a charitable person with people who are being authentic. But people who aren't being authentic, like these sorts of like posers, like you do not. They don't deserve authenticity either, because they will never give it to you.
Yeah. You know, that's so fucking crazy. All of like the streamers who are like Samantha's there, Sanso, and they're platforming Lauren. They were fucking getting mad at me. No shit. It's what the fuck? It's so weird. That is so weird, honestly. Makes no sense.
Communism's the cool kid club. No, fuck that shit. Fuck that shit, man.
But no, these are people like like these are people who are getting involved in like drama because it's like, oh, you're talking to right wingers or whatever. But like they're like literally hosting Lauren Southern. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, exactly. That's like, there's so many fun ironies of that. Yeah, like there's like frankly, those type of like anarcho leftists or whatever are like the absolute worst people in the country. Like, they actually have like, they're like less redeemable in some ways even than like the oligarch, because like they act as if they are like oligarchs. Like, they want to be like, they treat the world in the same way.
It's because of my crisscross theory of politics is correct. It's like the
we have the same theory on that. Actually,
it's the lib left plus the authoritarian right. That's why they're like friends with Lauren Southern.
Yeah, it's the same shit, man. Like, that's like, you go far enough into like the whole Earth catalog, like anarchist thing, and then you like look and you're like, oh, wait a minute, like I'm doing human sacrifice rituals for the fucking for nature, for the god of nature.
Let me type. I have to wait.
No, I think you want right libertarians and left authoritarians are like the same thing. They're the same thing.
Yeah, it's the crisscross. And also another thing is also like the mysticism thing, right? Because like lib left is like associated with like new age shit and stuff, and then obviously that's connected to fucking like Nazi occultism and shit.
Yeah, you have like also like the types of Christianity you could see manifested in those ways, right? In those like four corners.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like
Yeah,
it
definitely like
applies to yeah.
the authoritarian left and the libertarian right are way more like traditionalists kind of instead of the new age stuff, they're more into like the, just like conservative or Christian, whatever
Like folk
values.
culture also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like that's like one thing that you have to actually press like the authoritarian rightists on or whatever on their appreciation of like folk culture. They hate folk culture.
True.
They're constantly pissed off at folk culture. What they like is like this like bourgeois like
This
bourgeois medievalism.
they
Like
or they're obsessed with this. This is what they never understand. Is like their neoclassicism, which is what it is fucking. It's the aesthetics of modernity. It's literally the
yes,
quintessential aesthetics of modernity. It's like that is modern art, neoclassicism. Like so much so that the fucking modern art that they decry, which is like what the like Bauhaus and the fucking
yeah, it was a revolution against
formalists.
that shit.
That came from neoclassicism. That was like a direct lineage. So yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing I don't get with like these fucking so-called trad people, and they're like, oh, we have to defend the West, but like, what is the substantive content of this West you're talking about? Because it's literally just negation, abstraction, and criticism.
Well,
Like
I think that there is like stuff to defend, right? Like for instance, like I was saying, like "Death to America, Long Live America." Like
yeah,
that's how I
yeah.
feel with like the West in general. The thing is like yeah, I mean that, but when these people are like, "Oh yeah, like we have to protect the West or whatever," and it's like, "Oh yeah, you mean
But
like Proust and like Herman Melville and
well,
like
here's the
Emerson
thing.
and
They
Thoreau,
they
like that what you mean?"
They no, they don't mean. That's what I mean. Like what they mean by the West is they mean like modern. They mean modernity basically. Like they don't care about the actual like substantive content of like pre-modern or whatever, America and Europe. Like they don't give a shit about that. They fucking care about um this like the Cartesian cogito and it's like tyranny thereof.
Yeah, they're actually this like they're ultra libs.
Yeah,
They just
exactly.
wanted to. They're like so they're like I tried being a classical liberal, but you actually need to like suspend liberalism in order to defend liberalism, which is why I'm a fascist now. So like I want to like use illiberal means to defend liberalism. That's basically
Exactly.
all it
That's
is.
literally exactly what it is. It's like right on the nose. That is exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean it's like and like I try to like I don't know like the I hope you do well with the Keith Woods debate or whatever, but those guys are really fucking annoying. They kept like I was arguing with them on Twitter and like all 20 of them in their group chat or whatever would like each thing and be like you're getting take this L like they're like
Oh my
psyoping
god.
themselves into thinking that they're like winning or like they have to like create the illusion of like might makes right like look we're ratioing you because we like posted this like sassy GIF reply and it's like these people aren't authentic. Like they're not serious.
Yeah, that's
They're just
sounds.
posers too. The thing is that a lot of them come from the like ultra leftist background too, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. They're fucking left comms. I know that shit. Yeah, they're like dude, their criticisms of ML is literally left com criticisms. That's the thing. It's like, "Oh yeah, we did not abolish commodities." And it's like, "Yeah, that's left com
Yeah.
shit."
Or they'll go like they're like, yeah, you didn't abolish commodities, which means that it's actually fascism. But that
Yeah.
means it's actually based because I'm a fascist. And it's like, well, shut the fuck up. Like you're actually just mystifying everything. Like you're just making it harder for anyone to understand shit. And you're not serious. You're not engaging with this authentically. You're pretending to, but you're only like, why are you reading these books? It's because you saw them on like an infographic of like base right wing fascist like literature background stuff, and so they just like read these things and check them off, and they'd be like, "Oh, I've read like the literature," and it's like, "Did you read Marx first?" And they're like, I don't have to because it's all fucking bullshit. They're all posers.
Yeah, definitely.
It pisses me off though, because like I'm serious. I'm like a serious person. Is the thing. Like I'm not like people like call me like an irony cell or whatever. But when I use irony, I'm using it for like serious purposes. You know what I mean? Like I'm very serious about the concept of irony. Also, I think that it's like a very important thing. I'm not like that flippant about my own use of irony.
Yeah, I agree. I have to use
We
the
need just
bathroom.
like hardcore seriousness is my thing. Well, if you're going to the bathroom, I'll just field questions from your chat.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, dude. One thing before I go though, just remember like, TOS. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I won't do any. I promise. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know all the TOS shit. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And if you don't know, just like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
super
I'll err
strict.
on the side of like real of caution. I'll be on my dinner table conversation shit.
Okay, man, appreciate it. Okay, I'm gonna be right back.
Okay, so for instance, I'm not going to answer the thing about the Taliban. I got.
Yeah. Just like on like the.
I support everything. I like The Office, and I am basic, and I love liberalism, guys. All right, nods are asleep now. No, I don't play Among Us. No, I don't. I played it once with my friends when we were drinking. It was okay. Thanks for reading my poetry book. What's my favorite color? I always like purple. I always like you probably note that if you see like what I make like images or whatever. I like black, white, and like purple and like silver and gold. I don't know. Um, Workers co-ops. I have nothing wrong. I have no problem with workers co-ops. I just don't think that you can make literally everything into a workers co-op. You know what I mean? Like, there's these people who are like, everything has to be a workers co-op. Let me see. Kind of scrolling fast now. Moon landing. I don't know, man. I go back and forth on that. Frankly, I don't know. Depends on how schizo I'm feeling. Interesting things about William Blake. Many people wouldn't know. I mean, I feel like most people don't know anything about William Blake, but fuck. I mean, his whole life's interesting. One of my favorite things is like he got arrested for like yelling at like the cops basically. Main Currents of Marxism. It's a good book. Yeah, read it. It's good. I don't know. I don't have strong thoughts on it, I guess. Do I play chess? Yes. I'm not super great, but I like playing blitz chess. Devil's Chessboard. Yes, Devil's Chessboard is a good book. You should read that. What do I think about the JFK death? I mean, obviously, he got fucking taken out by the CIA. I mean, let's be real here. My podcast is if you go on my Twitter account, it's my profile, the Patreon for it. It's on the Pseudodoxological Podcast Network with like me, Appa, and Edberg. But mine's called Read Books. We're going to be reading Edmund Spencer right now. Do I know Soviet chess history? Not like super deeply. I know a lot about the history of like chess puzzles and stuff like that because I studied Nabokov a lot. Why don't I block those sassy GIF midwits on Twitter? Because sometimes, like quote tweeting or whatever, you're sort of trying to like sublate. Like it is kind of like a Hegelian process, like the quote tweet. So sometimes you want to have around these like people who embody like the something that's like the absolute opposition to you, because then like your arguments with them can sort of represent that dialectical overcoming of their argument. At least I hope. That's like the only reason why I don't block everyone. I do block a lot of people, but I only block people if they seem like fundamentally unserious. If they're like serious, then like I give them a chance. I'll give them like 3 chances usually. Cool. All right. Those are good questions. Puerto Rico U.S. relations, it's super fucked. Holy shit. Puerto Rico is like so abused by us, man. Like it's so bad. We have a lot of Puerto Rican followers. They're really getting they like I mean they have to deal with so much of like that Rockefeller like liberal imperial shit. Like that was like their country was just a fucking like petri dish for like eugenics programs and all this sort of shit. No one fucking knows anything about it, man. It's fucked.
Let's see what Lauren Southern's saying.
Around hating white people. That's not productive. It's not helping anyone.
My politics are based around hating Canadians. Ugly pirate. We are over
That's fair
time.
enough,
To everybody,
The Break the Rules
everybody
podcast,
listening right now.
Lev has like the first time I ever talked to Lev, like and it popped up. He had a poster of Karl Popper over his shoulder, so I knew exactly. Lev is like a great example of that. I like going on there, if only because Lev is himself a liberal imperialist, and you can see that in how he governs his own show. Like he is a liberal, but he's so imperial, and like he wants absolute totalitarian control over his own show. So he kind of represents perfectly his own ideology.
That the lib thing, like the unironic like lib thing, is like so common on Twitch. It's like the main thing on Twitch. It dominates.
Yeah, I mean the thing is because well, I mean Destiny is like the best example of that, but Destiny is like a fundamentally serious person, right? He just takes he's very self-conscious of what it means to be a liberal. He's like, I'm a consequentialist, I'm a utilitarian. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
he checks all of the boxes and he like owns it. The thing is with the as you said about him, right? Like he hasn't had like the moment to like see what liberalism actually is. You
yeah.
know? Like
That's
he
yeah,
believes in the ideology, but like he really has studied it and he does really believe in it.
yeah. I mean, I wanted to set up something between him and Kantbot, but Destiny was not like operating. But maybe I don't know. Maybe he will.
Yeah, I mean the thing is like I don't. What does he have to gain, really? Or like he also like the problem with like liberals is like they only accept conversations on their own terms, and their terms imply their conclusions. So basically,
Yeah,
arguing with a liberal, they're just basically like putting a gun to your head and saying like, agree with me, accept my hypothesis, accept like they always have to construct a fiction too. They never talk
here's
about
my
reality.
question: uh, would you ever like debate one of these like logic debate lords?
I mean, the thing is like, what is a debate? You know what I mean? Like, I think the form of the debate, like, what does it mean? Is like we're gonna have to like, so it's gonna be like it starts off and it's like, okay, we're gonna argue about definitions, and then we're gonna argue about like whether or not the hypothetical or analogy you presented is actually applicable, and we're just
Yeah,
gonna do this, struggling to do this for like hours, and it's just gonna suck. It's always really boring. I mean, that's like, it took me so long to like actually create a debate with Amy about China in that whole stream because everyone's so averse to actually having a substantive discussion. It always turns into these like games of definition and,
I debated a guy
you
named
know,
Ask Yourself, and we debated for 2 hours about me trying to tell him that I don't have to clarify what the word bad means
yeah,
for two
yeah. I think
hours.
something's bad. Oh, what do you mean by that? I think I'm opposed to it. I don't think it's
No,
good.
no,
It is not
it's
good.
not even that. It's not even that. If he's like, okay, why do you think it's bad? It's like, okay, I can tell you, but he's like, he was literally saying, what is bad? And it's like, do you mean it's against your preferences? And I'm like, what? I mean, it's bad. Like, why would I'm using the word bad, like what?
No, but don't you know that bad just means downvote? You know, like that's all it means. And like
Yeah,
like so like the thing is, right? Like that's what liberals do. Like they'll be like, you have to accept a frame. Like they won't even be able to start a discussion unless you like join. They're like the Saw game, right? They're like, welcome to my twisted chamber of my thought experiment. And it's like, like, do you pull the lever? Like, who do you kill? Like, this is like liberals. This is how they argue. They're like terrorists, man.
yeah. Well, I called him a computer. I said, you're literally a computer, dude. You live in the computer.
Yeah, they do because the thing is like I like William Blake because William Blake will actually give you like the symbolic vocabulary to see the reign of Urizen and like the fucking Masonic liberal demiurge like literally carved into the world all around you in America, especially in San Francisco, man. It's like I was like on the corner of Mason and Turk Ave, and I was just like, oh man, like I felt like the fucking spooky energy. Like I'm like a it's literally like carved into the world, this sort of like liberal deism. Like most people are still deists. Like you talk to Destiny, he'll be like, well, the simulation hypothesis, da, 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 da. And it's like, this is just deism, dude. Like you're an 18th century deist.
Yeah, very true. I don't
That's
know.
what they all are. Nothing's really changed. Like you could say a lot of like this sort of like Discord server like politics is just like our form of like technological Freemasonry, where it's like this is
Yeah,
like everyone has their like lodge, and it has like you got these like you move up and you get badges and you have like different titles and things. It's literally like micro targeted Freemasonry.
that is so true.
Yeah, so it's weird because people are really alienated from like, why did everyone in America join all these Freemason things? And it's like, well, fucking, why are you on Discord servers, dude? Like it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's oh my god, yeah, yeah. Fucking club. Um,
Like this is like so that's why like I've been trying to do it like self-consciously, promoting it with a sort of ironic detachment where I'm like, we're the Rosicrucians. Because like
yeah,
that's what everyone's fundamentally doing. They're making their own little Rosicrucian college. Like we are even unconsciously we're replicating like the forms of socialization and institutions and things that are our tradition here in America. There's nothing wrong with fraternities. There's nothing wrong with having societies like that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think on Discord, it's like there's so many psychos and weirdos.
Yeah, dude. I mean, same thing with fucking Mason halls, man. But there's also a lot of this like salt of the earth fucking people.
But here's the
who
thing:
are
is
just
like, at least with those, it's like you have skin in the game, and like it's your identity. Like Discord is anonymous, so it's like there's so many fucking stupid that goes on just because of that.
Yeah, I know, man. It freaks me out because I'm more and more spooked out by the early days of the internet and like its ties to the like whole Earth catalog type people and like Usenet fucking cults. Like, do you ever look into like the cult of the dead cow and stuff? It was this like hacking group that Moldbug and Beto O'Rourke were a part of, like in the 90s.
What?
Did you not know this?
No, I didn't.
It's called the cult.
Explain,
The cult.
explain.
Look, Google the cult of the dead cow.
That Beto O'Rourke and Moldbug?
Yeah.
The fuck is that?
Yeah.
A computer hacker media organization founded in Texas. How big were they?
Yeah.
They must have had like thousands of members, right?
It wasn't that big because this is like early days of the internet, right? But like this is not the only one of these. There were tons of these like hacker little groups and stuff like that. But the thing is that they were instrumentalized by the State Department early on to do things like cyber warfare against China, like in the 90s.
Wait, Moldbug was in it?
Yeah.
He's
a lot
not
of people
listed
were.
in the key people thing.
Yeah, he had a different pseudonym.
What was it?
I forget which one it is.
The fuck?
But he was.
Beto
Yeah.
O'Rourke was in this shit? The fuck is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, man, it's like Gen X culture, dude. This is like you should check out some of the early Usenet stuff. You can read all these people who are now like powerful like venture capitalists and stuff, and they're just like arguing about like Battlestar Galactica or whatever the fuck like on Usenet like in the 90s.
Which seeks to apply the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to the internet.
The thing is that I like Curtis. I've actually met him. I don't know if he would talk to me anymore, but I think I think he's a serious person. I don't think that he's like trolling or being Mencius Moldbug, Curtis.
Moldbug, yeah.
I think he's an authentic person. Like I think he's like serious,
But is he like a government agent or something? Or
well, his family that he self-admittedly like that's what his family is like his family's like State Department type people.
Fuck.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how it is, man. Yeah, the early internet culture stuff is what I've been thinking about a lot, and like sort of like the Encyclopedia Dramatica stuff, and like how much
people who are behind Alamut.
I don't know what that is.
All right, Amalut, whatever. Like another hacker thing. I don't know. I think they were inspired by Hakim.
Oh, dude, Hakim Bey is a fucking nightmare. That sort of shit too, like Burroughs and like that whole like Tangiers connection where they're like going over to like do fucking opium.
I
and
used to read
boys.
the things I got into this rabbit hole because I used to read Nick Land's old like blog where him, Reza, and Mark Fisher would like talk with each other.
Yeah,
and that kind of put me on a rabbit hole where like I found a lot of like weird, just early internet stuff,
Yeah, I mean, I like grew up like idolizing that shit. You know what I mean? Like that was like what I thought was like the coolest shit ever. Like I was on the Bitcoin wave in like 2009 or some shit. Like I always knew about this. No,
oh, fuck.
No, I was literally like 15 and I had no money. Like I didn't have a job or anything. And I remember telling my parents, I was like, "Can you give me like $500 so I can buy this cryptocurrency?" And they're like, "Why? What is it for?" I'm like, "Well, it has inelastic demand because it's used on the darknet drug markets. So I think that it would be a good investment." like what? Like they were like, "What? Like what the fuck is wrong with you?"
Yeah. Damn, dude. What the fuck? There's a guy named Mudge. Let me look at all these people. So this guy, he's in DARPA. Who's this guy? he's in MIT. And what the fuck, dude? This is so weird. In Beto O'Rourke, where did that?
Do you want to know a funny follow-up story to that? A funny follow-up story to that is after Bitcoin like took off, and I was like showing my parents, and they're like, "Oh my god, like wow, we really should have given you that money, like holy shit." And they're like, and my dad was like, "If you ever have a sure bet like that ever again, like let me know, and I will do it like no questions asked." So the day after Donald Trump announces that he's running for president, I call my dad and I go, "Put $500 on Donald Trump winning right now. This is the for sure thing." And he was like, "You're fucking crazy."
That's That's hilarious. Oh my god. So, did you really think he was gonna win?
Yeah, I knew it. I literally like had a vision. Like I was like, I tweeted the day of. Actually, I have like a record of this saying like Donald Trump is the president America deserves, and he's the president America will get. And that's absolutely true. And I knew that he was going to win the entire time. Like I could just tell.
Here's my question for you. What do you think about 2024?
He could win. He could win 2024 pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing.
But I think that would possibly like destroy the country. That might even be like I don't know, like
catalyst.
Like yeah, like I don't know if people can handle that. I don't know, man. But I don't like. I think he could win, but like also like the fact that he could win means that maybe like 2024 will be like 2020 and like 20 times worse. You know what I mean? Because like that's the only way that it was possible for him to not to have won last time, right? Was like all this fuckery and shit.
Do you think like the Delta variant's gonna cause chaos before then, or what do you think?
We're doing this forever, man. I could just quote you on Andrew Sullivan or whatever. He said one of the goals of the Biden policy, the Biden doctrine now is to make public health a permanent national security concern. So what do you think that means? Like if you translate that out of ideology speak?
Fuck. Yeah, you're right. 100% right.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, yeah, so that's why also, right, if we're talking about civil liberties and stuff like that, that actually is the perfect thing to rally around under these conditions, because we're actually being denied our civil liberties. And that's what everyone in the working class recognizes.
Well, yeah, I mean, on that note, though, I think...
Yeah, I can piece. You should argue Lauren Southern. That would be funny.
We'll see, yeah. All right, it's always a pleasure to have you on, man.
Yeah, man, it's a good talk. It was nice talking to you. I just wanted to like get some shit out because I've been thinking about stuff, and it's easier to talk to you than to get shit by on fucking break the rules or any of these other things.
Yeah, true.
Word.
All right, man, we'll talk again.
All right, man.
See, so if you want to shout like your stuff out, like his logo.
Yeah,
it's the
Logo
way I
Daedalus.
The title. It's Logo Daedalus on Twitter, and then what's your podcast?
The podcast, it's the Pseudodoxology Podcast Network. You can just find it on my Twitter account, though. Yeah, we're kind of pretentious, so we use like obscured words and shit. It's a good form of encryption, though. You know, keeps the normies out, keeps the fucking shitty people out. So, yeah, go do that. I wrote a novel. I wrote a poetry collection. You know, you can probably fucking pirate those too. I don't really care. But I just wanted to chill and talk to y'all and get the word out. You know, so peace out, everyone.
Appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Hello? Hello? Thank you so much, Vermilion. Appreciate it. If I missed any of you guys, sorry about that. Let me see if I missed anyone. Chris Morlock, thank you. D Solano with the 1. You have any suggestions for Californians pertaining to the recall election? No, I don't know anything about that. Chris Morlock, appreciate you, man. Let me read through anyone else I missed. Vermilion. Chris Sue, thank you for the sub, man. Okay. Neat. I already got you. All right, see you later, Logo.